Hi, welcome to another episode of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and today we're going to be talking about my collection. Now, this is one of the, what I like to call general episodes. I'm not going to be focusing on any one toy to review or anything like that. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the toys that I've added to my collection this week. We'll talk a little bit about movies I've watched this week, and a little bit about the comic books I read this week. So hopefully you stick around. Even though it's not really a focused topic. And yeah. So I'll start off by saying I'm feeling a little rough today. I'm staying home sick from work. So, and it's my own fault. It was my bachelor party this past weekend.
Oh, buddy. Hey, move on. Get yourself around. Go for it. Just go for it. Mike Highland.
And I'm getting married in 3 weeks, so that's exciting. But yeah, my buddies dragged me out to New Brunswick for some partying this week. I live in Nova Scotia, which is an Atlantic province here in Canada on the East Coast. New Brunswick is a province over. The main reason they dragged me over there is because our province doesn't have any strip clubs. So yeah, we went over there and we had a good time on the weekend, but I'm still feeling it today. So I am homesick. It's my own fault. If my boss John is watching this, I apologize that I'm not in today, but I will be there tomorrow. So yeah, so still recovering, but I did manage to find some toys while I was in New Brunswick, so that's cool. And so I'll talk about those in a second. The only movie I think I saw this week was Shazam. I went and saw that on Friday, so I'll talk about that. And yeah, and then I'll talk a little bit about comic books at the end. So let's get into it with the new toys that I got. So as soon as we pulled into New Brunswick, the first place we went was Toys R Us, and I found this King Caesar figure from he's one of Godzilla's many enemies. So yeah, I picked up this guy. So there's a couple other Godzillas in the line, but they didn't have those guys there. They just had Caesar and King Ghidorah. Now, even though I'm a big King Ghidorah fan, I didn't bother picking him up because these toys are pretty cheap and, you know, just kind of hollow rubbery. There's nothing too spectacular about them. And I know there's going to be some better King Ghidorah figures available very soon because that new movie's coming out and he's featured in it. So yeah, I'll just quickly take a look at this guy out of the packaging here. So here's King Caesar out of the package, and yeah, not much else to see here as he was pretty much exposed in the packaging as well. Very limited articulation, just there on the thighs, and the arm articulation, it's not even at the elbow, or it's like kind of weird mid-arm swivel there. The arms, as you saw earlier, they pop off very easily. Yeah, no okay, his tail spins around a little bit. And he turns at the waist as well. No articulation at the neck or anything. So I know he's kind of a goofy looking figure. He almost looks like one of those Where the Wild Things Are guys. But he is a long-standing classic Godzilla character. And as I mentioned in our previous video, it's very hard to get figures of some of the supporting cast in Godzilla, at least at reasonable prices. Some of them you can get from Japan for hundreds of dollars. But now it would be nice if this was a fully articulated action figure, more in line with like this Godzilla that I got recently, you know, with the articulated jaw, all those joints in the arms and all that sort of stuff. But this Godzilla, or sorry, this King Caesar is more in line with what most of the Godzilla toys in my collection look like, which are that kind of just hollow rubber, very limited articulation. So yeah, this guy is more in line with that. But yeah, I really wish I could get a whole series of figures that looked and moved and everything this nicely. But anyway, so yeah, that was the first thing I picked up on my bachelor party trip. So, King Caesar. So after Toys R Us, my second stop for toy shopping in Moncton was a place called Spin It Records, which is a very, very cool store. Every time I'm in New Brunswick, specifically Moncton, New Brunswick, I'm always looking forward to checking out this store. I'm always worried that it's going to be out of business every time I go because it seems like kind of a dinosaur of a store. It's got a video rental store in the front and then a toy store in the back, and then even further back there's a record store, and so they're all connected. But yeah, the video store looks like just what you'd imagine, like a video store in the heyday. They've got shelves and shelves and shelves of DVD rentals and previously viewed movies. It's really cool, but I can't believe it's still there. And then the toy store, they don't carry any new stuff. It's all used toys, but some of it is still in its packaging and stuff. But it's stuff dating back to the 70s, just bins and bins of loose figures, cabinets everywhere, just stuffed to the brim. Like I could spend a day in there and I wouldn't see everything. It's just crazy. It's very close quarters and everything is just piled on top of each other. It's crazy. And then the record store in the back has also got a ton of cool stuff. A lot of concert DVDs and patches and pins and vinyl. So yeah, Spin It Records. If you're ever in New Brunswick, awesome store. Anyway, they had a bunch of loose G.I. Joes, and I picked up these 3 guys here. Now, these 3 are all from the Rise of Cobra movie line. So that was the first live-action G.I. Joe line from 2009. And I was really into G.I. Joe at that particular time. Like in 2007 is when the modern era of figures began, and they started with the 25th anniversary line. So it was a bunch of figures that were modeled to look like the toys I bought in the 80s, except new and improved. But the characters and the costumes were all very familiar. And that was going great for the first 2 years. And then 2009 came out, and I was very excited about a live-action G.I. Joe movie. And then when images of the figures and stuff started hitting, it really disappointed me. I ultimately liked that movie for what it is. It's kind of a fun, silly movie, but I always kind of felt like this isn't my G.I. Joe. And this guy here is a prime example. So the Neo Viper was kind of the general Cobra Trooper. Now, really, you can't even say Cobra Trooper because Cobra didn't even really appear in the movie. Like, it's called Rise of Cobra because basically Cobra Commander comes into being on the last scene of the movie. And so this is almost like the lead up. It was the Rise of Cobra. So this guy is essentially the Cobra Trooper, but at the time it was, they worked for, like, Mars or whatever the evil organization was. Cobra wasn't quite established. And when I saw this thing for the first time, I was just like, what the hell is this? Like the Cobra Trooper, like the standard blue Cobra Trooper with the black mask and the blue helmet, it's such an iconic look, and it would have been relatively easy to recreate in the real world. I don't know why they didn't go with that. And then not to mention the Cobra Viper and all the various versions of the Cobra Viper, even if you wanted to go Crimson Guard or like any of those. There's so many Cobra Troopers that they could have went with that fans like myself would have been so stoked to see on screen. And instead they came up with something totally different that didn't look like anything else we had seen before. And I was kind of pissed off about it. And then all the characters, like some of the character choices, like they put in Heavy Duty. And like, why not put in Roadblock? Like, Heavy Duty is a much more like minor character, lesser known character. Nobody would have wanted to see Heavy Duty more than they would have wanted to see Roadblock. Again, it just seemed like a weird choice. And none of the characters they selected looked like they were supposed to. Like Ripcord, who's normally like a white guy with red hair, they cast Marlon Wayans. Duke, you know, he's always had that kind of blonde hair, and they cast Channing Tatum with brown hair. There's just nothing quite looked right. And so the movie line really turned me off from figures. So even though I was buying everything they put out in 2007, 2008, I really slowed down when the movie line came out. And I still bought quite a few of the movie figures, but I only bought like one of each character. So for example, with Heavy Duty, there was multiple versions available. I bought this one, which is him in his accelerator suit. Or maybe not even the accelerator suit. This is just the costumes that the G.I. Joes all wore. This kind of plain black. And again, that pissed me off because G.I. Joes all wore very distinct and individual costumes. So to get them in these all black outfits just seems silly. They were dressed like the movie X-Men, and I didn't like it. Anyway, so that was the only Heavy Duty I had in my collection. Never bothered with this one or the various other ones. And I did actually buy the Neo Viper. I had one of him. And this guy here is a Lava Viper. And he came, I believe, packaged with the Mole Pod, that kind of drilling vehicle. And I intentionally avoided this guy because this just seemed very lazy to me. Like, G.I. Joe is full of repaints, but this is Crocmaster. And he is a unique character in G.I. Joe. And they just took, this is the exact same head and torso with that crocodile armor. Now, they did give him different arms and different legs. But like, even this paint job is just super lazy, and the black and silver. They don't explain like why would this guy have crocodile armor on if he's a lava viper or whatever. This head sculpt is just too unique to Crocmaster. So yeah, this just seemed like a lazy figure, and I wanted nothing to do with it. So anyway, I didn't buy a lot of the movie figures, is what I'm saying. But as the years went on, and I kind of grew to like that movie more for what it was. And it's like, okay, for a while I was worried that this is going to be what G.I. Joe became, and all the figures afterwards would be done in this style. But they quickly kind of went back to the 25th anniversary style and got back to basics a little bit more. So this was just really a blip on the radar. And I've kind of grown more fondly of it, knowing that it didn't destroy the brand, but it was just like a little brief period of time. And so now I've gone back and wanted to collect more of these movie-based figures. So that's why I went and picked up this heavy duty. Each of these figures were just loose, so they only cost me a couple of bucks. None of them had any of the weapons with them. Heavy duty's got his backpack, but he normally would have, I think, probably the same big machine gun that this guy has. And he doesn't have that, but that's fine with me. I've got a whole bin full of extra guns and stuff I can give him. So anyway, it's a decent figure, and it's kind of cool to be able to find these figures, which are now 10 years old, and get them for only a couple of bucks a piece. So yeah, there's heavy duty. And the Lava Viper, he didn't even come with his display base. And I still think this is a pretty shitty figure, but still, it's a G.I. Joe that I didn't have. And even though I reluctantly say he's a unique character because he's such a lazy knockoff of Crocmaster, he is technically the only Lava Viper figure that exists. And so now I finally have him. And as for the Neo Viper here, I actually have this exact figure already. He wasn't new to my collection, but for only $3, I thought, yeah, you know what? I'll add another one to my ranks because I've actually become a big fan of the Neo Viper look. Whoops. And I've added all the different color variations. Here's just a handful of them. But I've actually really come to appreciate this look. And he's kind of one of my favorite Cobra Troopers now. So I have probably 7 or 8 different color variations. And so even though I already have this exact guy, I thought, yeah, sure, why not? Add him to my collection. So that was kind of a neat find at Spin It Records. So this is the first new toy I got this week. This is the Star Wars Black Series Imperial Jump Trooper. And this guy was a complete surprise. I went into my local EB Games, which is like a GameStop. And yeah, I was looking at pops and whatnot. And this guy, he wasn't even on a peg. I kind of found him sitting on the floor in a pile of stuff. I barely noticed him. And yeah, I didn't even know this figure was coming out. I hadn't seen it previewed anywhere. So yeah, that was a kind of a nice surprise. And he looks pretty cool. I'm always happy to get Stormtrooper variations. So let's pop this guy open and take a look at him. So here is the Imperial Jump Trooper out of his packaging. And you can see he looks pretty cool. He's got nice little pistol there, which I think is pretty standard for the Stormtroopers. He's got a holster on the back of his belt that he can store his gun. Kind of a neat backpack there with the hoses that connect to the helmet. The helmet looks like it's kind of a cross between standard Stormtrooper and the AT-AT pilot. So, yeah. He's pretty basic, but he's got some neat features that make him stand out from the rest of the Stormtroopers in my collection. And yeah, I like him. The second figure I got this week is General Grievous, who's also part of the Star Wars Black Series. And I knew this figure was coming out, but I didn't know he was coming out this soon. And this was kind of a nice surprise. When I bought the Jump Trooper at EB Games, when I was paying for him, the guy said, "Oh, you didn't want General Grievous too?" And I was like, "Oh, I didn't realize he was there. I must have missed him." And he checked, and the one they had for sale had apparently sold, but he called another one of their other locations, and they still had one. So those guys set him aside for me. And yeah, so I picked him up the next day. So here's General Grievous. And yeah, let's take a look at him outside this package. So here is General Grievous outside of the package. And yeah, he looks pretty awesome. He came with those 4 different lightsaber accessories. So 2 blue, 2 green. He also came with a pistol here, which looks like kind of the standard one, maybe even the same one as the Jump Trooper. I'm not sure if he has somewhere to holster that, maybe. So he's got a real cloth cape. Okay, that's pretty cool. So he's got pockets in his cape, just like he had in the movie, where you can store all of his lightsabers. So I'm not sure if perhaps the blades come out of these lightsabers or not. It'd be cool if they did. That way you could just tuck the lightsaber handles in his flag, in his cape. I'm not sure they come out. I don't want to force it, but even if they don't, it's still a neat feature that they added the pockets there. Yeah, articulation, just at a glance, it seems nice. I will point out that the grip in this one hand seems a little looser than his other three, so that lightsaber is wobbling around a little bit more. But yeah, so the arms appear to be on ball joints there. At least the top ones, a little less movement in the lower arms. Double articulated at the knee, I think. Articulated at the foot. Some swivel at the waist. And okay, the head kind of comes forward, which is pretty cool. And a ball joint there as well, I believe. Anyway, so yeah, this is a pretty nice figure. I can imagine he's probably going to be a little difficult to keep standing up on my shelf because his legs are so skinny. But yeah, let's take a look at his face there, a little more detail. Yeah, so that's pretty nice. Yeah, but overall, this is a pretty cool figure, so I'm glad I found him, as I imagine this one might be kind of hard to track down. And next up is Citizen V. So he's a member of the Thunderbolts team, and this is part of the first wave from Avengers Endgame. So you see on the package here all the other characters you can get. So Captain America, Ronin, so those are from the movie that's not quite out yet, and the Build-A-Figure is Thanos. So I knew these were coming out soon. I knew they'd come out around the time of the movie. I wasn't expecting to find them this soon. But when I went to the other EB Games location to pick up the General Grievous they had set aside for me, they actually had the full series of these guys here. So I picked up a few of them. So, like I said, this is Citizen V. And let's take a look at him outside of the package. Alright, so here is Citizen V. I like the look of him. The mask does a pretty good job of recreating the look in the comic books, this kind of weird featureless mask. The cape looks nice. Maybe hinders the arm movement a little bit there, but not too bad. Otherwise, pretty standard articulation, which is, got lots of it. These Marvel Legends are always really good for as far as articulation goes, so I won't bother getting into every single joint. The figure itself is a little boring looking, like the body design. He could probably use a logo or some knee pads or something just to spruce up the design. But overall, I'm happy to get this character. So, Citizen V. So also from Avengers Endgame, the toy series, not the movie, but this is Nighthawk. So there you see him. And let's take a look at him outside of the package. So here's Nighthawk. And yeah, looks pretty cool. This is not a character I know a ton about, even though I am a pretty hardcore Marvel geek. I've never really gotten into any of the books that Nighthawk has appeared in. Even though I've read, a few of his appearances, but yeah, he's always a cool looking figure. And whether I know them or not, I just like adding these kind of like C-list, D-list characters to my Marvel Legends collection. And yeah, the cape looks really nice. Very big and broad. I already had a figure of this guy from the 3 3/4 inch line, which was pretty nice. But this guy is, I would say, substantially better. You get in there with a lot more detail on the face and whatnot. He has a lot of personality in that scowl there. And yeah, there's not a whole lot to him either. Like, he's a little more interesting to look at than Citizen V, but it's still a pretty basic design. Probably just a standard body. They just painted that logo on there, but there's not much in the way of sculpted detail. He does have his little talons, his little mini Wolverine claws, which is nice. And yeah, Nighthawk is pretty cool. And the last figure I picked up from the Avengers wave is the Living Laser. So I was really looking forward to this one here. And he looks pretty cool. Nice artwork on the side. So yeah, let's pop this guy open and take a look at him. So here is the Living Laser. And yeah, this is I think my favorite one of the bunch. He's just really cool looking. And now he, again, is very simple. You can see by his body, it's pretty basic body design. Not really any sculpted detail on him. but he's cast in this translucent pink plastic, which just looks really neat. And yeah, I really like the look of this guy. Now, when I started collecting comic books, one of the very early comics I read featured the living laser fighting Iron Man, and he didn't look anything like this. He wore kind of a green and orange suit, and he was just a normal dude in a helmet. You could see his face, and yeah, nothing special. Then living laser, later on, John Romita Jr. drew him, and he was more like just a living lightning bolt. And this, I'm not sure when this look first appeared. I remember seeing it during the Matt Fraction run of Iron Man. But yeah, it's a pretty neat look. I still wouldn't mind getting figures of some of those other designs because they were so drastically different. But yeah, I really like this one. I don't know why he would have a helmet like that, what purpose it serves. But yeah, these little electricity or like laser effects, we've seen these before with a couple of figures, but they're removable. But it does give them something to just make him look a little more interesting. But yeah, as far as sculpting on the figure, he's got those weird little Batman things on his forearms. I'm not sure why. I don't even know if... I assume that must be how he looks in the comic books, but I couldn't swear by it. And the paint is pretty simple. So mostly translucent pink, then just a little bit of white there, some lightning effects on his arm, which, you know, they blend nicely in with the lightning effects there when you add them to him. So yeah, overall, pretty cool figure. I like this one a lot. So those were the 3 figures that I got from the first wave of Avengers Endgame. And I'm not sure if I'm going to get the other 4 figures. So this might be all I get from Thanos. This is the Build-A-Figure. So you might have noticed when I was showing them all in package that each one came with a piece of Thanos. So I got his leg, his arm, and his torso. So in order to get the rest of them, I need to buy Ronin, Hercules, and that other dude, Ebony Maw. So I don't know, maybe I'll pick them up eventually, but Ronin and Ebony Maw are not figures that I really care for that much. Hercules, it's nice like a figure, and he's a unique character, so I might get him eventually. He would come with Thanos' head, but I've never been a big fan of Hercules just as a character, so who knows. But yeah, so this Thanos, he looks like he might be a cool figure when all is said and done. And who knows, once I get Hercules and I get the head, maybe that'll be enough to convince me to buy the other 2 guys just to complete him. But I already have some pretty nice Thanos figures, so I don't know if I really need to finish this guy. Anyway, the last figure I got this week is this Pop, and it's Batman 80th anniversary figure. So this Pop is based off of his first appearance. Now, you guys have probably noticed, within these, I collect Pop figures. There he is out of the package. But within my big Pop collection, I also collect Batman specifically. You might have seen them in the background of pretty much all my videos there. I've got about 25 different variations of Batman over there. So it's cool to add another one. So first appearance Batman with his little purple gloves, his big ears, his kind of cape all blown out, which is kind of cool looking, kind of cute. So yeah, that is the last of the toys that I get this week, I believe. So let's move on to our movie segment. Flick Chat. Alright, so let's talk movies. Buster is going to be joining me, probably for only the first minute or so, because he can't stay still for very long. But he is just meowing and meowing at the door, and it's impossible for me to film anything unless I let him in here. But because of all the delicate little toys in this room, I cannot let him wander around on his own like he really, really wants to. So anyway, me and Buster will review Shazam together. Okay, buddy? So, yeah, I saw Shazam on Friday, and I will do my best to not spoil anything. I won't tell you any like major plot points, but if you haven't seen it and you really don't want anything talked about or spoiled for you, then you might want to jump ahead. But yeah, I'll do my best to keep it relatively spoiler-free. Although I will start by telling you that I did not like Shazam much at all, actually. Now, I went with my friend Brian, and he seemed to enjoy it. He was laughing all the way through. So yeah, I think he liked it just at face value, kind of the silly jokes. There was like maybe one thing I kind of liked, because, you know, this movie's been described as, you know, Big meets Superman, things like that. The movie Big is often mentioned in these reviews, and there was like a little homage to Big, which I thought was cute. But other than that, I found very little to like in this movie. Even was it Mark Strong plays the villain. Now, even though the Green Lantern movie was a bit of a stinker, I thought he was awesome as Sinestro. I thought he was the best thing about that movie. And it seemed a real shame in the last scene of that movie when they implied that he was going to become evil when he discovered the yellow ring. And that movie was so bad, they never got to do that sequel. I'm like, why didn't they just do Sinestro in the first movie? That would have made this so much better. It seemed like a real waste to waste Mark Strong in that role. But anyway, but yeah, in this movie, he didn't impress me. He wasn't the worst thing about it by any means. But yeah, he wasn't. He didn't save the movie, that's for sure. I don't want to knock Zachary Levi, who plays Shazam, because I was kind of rooting for. Okay, Buster, come on, buddy. I was kind of rooting for him. I was not necessarily a fan of Chuck or anything. I didn't watch any of those shows, but I just know he's a TV actor, and some of his shows have had a pretty strong following, and he's been at this a long time. And for him to get to star in a big superhero movie like this, when he's still essentially an unknown, I was really rooting for him. And when I saw the early reviews that this was being pretty well received, I was like, good for him. So yeah, I didn't have it out for him, but again, he did not do it for me in this role. I found the movie super corny. The jokes didn't land for me. The storyline I thought was really stupid. It's like I talked a little bit about in my Us review the other week. It's like I'm willing to go so far. I know with any superhero movie there's got to be some suspension of disbelief. And like, okay, this guy crash landed on Earth, like he's an alien with superpowers. I can accept that. But then just kind of keep it real once you establish that. Shazam's got a really goofy origin to get past, with like wizards and chosen ones, and the cat's giving me a really evil look right now. So I just thought this movie was too much stuff, too much silly stuff. All right, I'm gonna have to pause this and get rid of the cat, and hopefully he's quiet now that I've let him have his look around here. And yeah, I'll continue in a second. Sorry about that. I'm back. Basically, didn't care for Shazam. I thought the jokes were cheesy. The storyline was really dumb. Like, this won't spoil too much for you, but there is if you've seen the trailer, you know that he's living in a foster home. And so how did he get in a foster home? He lost his parents when he was young, and that whole storyline I just thought was really unrealistic and stupid, and everything. It's hard to talk about it and I don't want to spoil anything for you, but just certain scenes were like super convenient and silly. Again, I'm just going to go with in the trailer. If you've seen the trailer, you know that the one kid turns into a superhero, and so he comes looking for the other kid that he's one of his foster brothers or whatever, and he says, dude, I need you to talk to me about this stuff. You're the only one who knows anything about superheroes. Because the other kid with the cane has been established as he's like a real fanboy, and he knows everything about Superman, Batman, all that sort of stuff. He's kind of, he's got it together. He's got it figured out. So anyway, there's a scene when Shazam kind of gets snuck up on by the villain, played by Mark Strong, and they're fighting and they're punching each other through buildings, and, there's all kinds of damage, and people are running away, screaming, and all this sort of stuff. And the bad guy doesn't know that Shazam, in his other form, is really just a little kid. So anyway, he's beating the hell out of Shazam. And at one point, he knocks Shazam on the ground, and then he turns his back for a sec, and Shazam says the magic word. Shazam turns back into the kid and runs off into the crowd. So then bad guy turns around again. He doesn't know where Shazam went, and he doesn't know which one of these civilians is possibly Shazam. So then the little kid with the cane, who's supposedly smart and should know better than to run right up to a crazed supervillain who's knocking over buildings and stuff. So everybody clears out of this area except for this one kid with a cane who stands right under the floating supervillain, and he's going, Billy, Billy, where are you? And then the villain looks over at the news that's playing live on a big screen, and it shows footage of this same little kid that's standing in front of him talking to Shazam, like arguing from a scene that took place, just before the sneak attack. And so then the bad guy puts two and two together, like, oh, this kid knows Shazam, and now he's looking for his friend Billy. So then he grabs the kid and says, "You're going to tell me who Shazam really is. Tell me where this..." And I was like, this is all very, very convenient. Like, why would the kid run right in front of the supervillain and yell, "Billy, Billy"? Like, it was nonsense, and things like that I found kept happening. People were doing stupid decisions, which clearly just serviced the plot. A girl was reading a letter, and again, this girl is supposed to be like 17 years old, and they've established that she's very smart. She's applying for college. Anyway, she's reading her letter to find out if she got accepted for college, and she's about to walk in front of the biggest snowplow I've ever seen, and it is just barreling down the street, and she's walking there with her head in her letter like this, and it just so happened Shazam was right across the street doing something else, and then he managed just to save her, and then they have their little moment to connect and get to know each other a little bit, because she's kind of a prominent character later in the story. But just the placement of this, and that she would act so stupidly, and things like that just kept happening, and it was really taking me out of the movie. Maybe I'm being overly critical, but to be fair, and I didn't like Wonder Woman very much, and I didn't like Aquaman very much. And I know some people have said those were fantastic. Aquaman made over $1 billion. People I'd seen say Wonder Woman was the best superhero movie ever. I thought they were both okay. I liked certain parts of Wonder Woman. I thought Gal Gadot plays a very good and convincing Wonder Woman. She's good in that role. But I just thought the storyline was stupid, and the whole third act was garbage of that movie. And Aquaman was, again, Jason Momoa. I liked him as Aquaman. There was, the jokes in that one landed a little bit more. Some of the effects were pretty cool. And it had some decent actors in it. Like, I like Patrick Wilson. But I just, for one, it was too long. Too many little storylines that seemed to be a waste of time and not really lead to much. I just didn't really care for it. And I am definitely a Marvel guy. But I'm not one of these Marvel guys that wants to see DC fail. I really want to like a Batman and a Superman movie. I'd love to see the DC universe come together. And these positive reviews of Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Shazam keep tricking me into thinking, oh, finally, they have got it right. And then I feel disappointed with every single one of them. And I think Shazam was maybe one of the worst of the bunch. Like, even the bad ones, like Batman vs. Superman, which I thought was stupid. Like, I can still sit back and get some enjoyment out of it just because it is Batman and Superman on screen together. But Shazam, I don't think I'll ever revisit it. I thought it was just dumb. So, there you go.
Comic booking.
Okay, so this is the segment of the show called Comic Booking, where we're going to talk about the comic books I read this week. Now, I didn't get my comic books this week, so it makes it a little tough to do a segment about the comic books. Unfortunately, I used to work right downtown where my comic shop is, and so every Wednesday, like clockwork, for years and years and years, I would pick up my comic books every Wednesday. It would have to be a tornado or something outside to stop me from getting my comic books on Wednesday. But now, I live out in the suburbs, and I work kind of in a business park, neither of which is near the downtown core. So I have to make this extra trip downtown to get my comic books, and when it's really just a 5-minute quick interaction, it makes it hard to justify the extra drive into town and then getting out with the traffic and stuff at rush hour if I were to go in after work. It's just, so sometimes weeks go by where I don't get my comic books, unfortunately. But there is one little thing I did want to talk about with comic books, is in last week's episode of Comic Booking, I picked up Cloak and Dagger, Negative Exposure. And at the time I told you I just picked it up, I was excited to read it because I really like Cloak and Dagger, and they don't get to do a whole lot. They're not featured in a ton of comic books. So I was looking forward to reading this. So I have read it, and it wasn't very good. It wasn't necessarily bad. It's one of those comic books that when I was reading it, I was thinking, maybe I am too old for comic books. At least some of these superhero comic books. Like, there's still a ton of great comic books out there that I enjoy. But this one, I just felt it was, like, speaking down to me a little bit. And it's just kind of dumb. The plot. The bad guy. Sure, it's Mr. Negative on the cover, but he's working for a demon in the dark dimension, which is where Cloak gets his powers from. And the demon is just a big blob in the sky. With the kind of thing you see in movies all the time with, you know, Galactus or Parallax. And you always end up disappointed. Like, why is it just this big thing in the sky? Like Suicide Squad, Ghostbusters, you know, they always end with just this swishing thing in the sky that's supposed to destroy the world. And it's really kind of boring. Been there, done that. And in comic books, I somewhat understand with movies that it would maybe be really expensive to create a really cool monster like Galactus actually destroying the Earth. So they kind of cheap out and they make this mysterious cloud. In comic books, it's only limited by your imagination. They could have drawn something really cool, but they didn't. It was kind of a letdown, and I didn't feel the characters made the best decisions. Like, for example, just because the plot called for it, Cloak needed a girlfriend to try and drive a wedge between Cloak and Dagger. And this girl came out of nowhere. She literally drove by on her motorcycle. She's supposed to be kind of extreme. And she saw Cloak and Dagger like stop some bad guys. And she's like, hey, Cloak, let's date. And he's like, okay. And next thing you know, they're running around the world doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And it's just like, it didn't feel like a very believable relationship at all. It just kind of came out of nowhere. And it was only there just so that it could drive a wedge between them, which they later mended. And almost stupider of all is stupider of all? I don't know. But the whole plot was this evil creature was from the Dark Dimension, and he was the only thing that could stop him from coming to Earth was Cloak and Dagger teamed up together. They had the power to stop him. So he was working with Mr. Negative to split them up, because if they were divided, it would allow this creature to come to Earth. So as I was reading it, I thought, this girl that came out of nowhere, and she's like not acting like a real person would at all, and Cloak is totally just swayed by her and do whatever she wants to do, and she says, oh, stay away from Dagger, and he's like, okay. It would have totally made sense if it was revealed that this girl was actually just a demon from the Dark Dimension who was just doing the bidding to help split these two up. It would line up with the plot. It would make sense why she was acting the way she was. And then it turns out that wasn't the case. She was just some random chick who was poorly written. And yeah, my cat is moaning at the door again. I don't know if you can hear that. Anyway, despite all that, I didn't hate it. There's some comic books I read where I just hate halfway through it. I'm like, ugh, this comic book. But yeah, this one, it was just kind of inconsequential. It was okay. Anyway, I did learn when I opened it up right there on the inside front cover that there was another book also written, or was it written? Yeah. So both by Dennis Hopeless. I believe is his name. Is it Dennis? I think so. Yeah. So even though this one didn't super impress me, I did go out to Chapters, my local bookstore, and I grabbed that book, which takes place before this one. So some of the plot that was set up in this, or was already established in this. For example, like Dagger has a boyfriend; she's dating a cop, which I'd never seen before, and apparently that stuff gets established in this one. So this one entertained me enough to warrant me going back and reading the book prior. So my expectations, I feel, are adequately low for this, but still, I'll give it a read and I'll let you know how it goes. So Cloak and Dagger. The other thing I kind of wanted to talk about is last week I told you I read The Crow, Memento Mori, which I quite liked. It's by no means as good as the original Crow, but I thought the artwork, it was very... I liked the artwork a lot. It was kind of stylized. It was kind of moody. I think it fit with the style of Crow. Here's a pretty violent shot of him punching some guy's face off. Anyway, I liked it. And I said the last issue really kind of had some twists that made this stand out from the typical Crow fare. And when I say typical Crow fare, I would say that was kind of like the previous Crow story, which was just more of a straight up revenge flick. But I enjoyed this quite a bit too. This was from a couple years ago. And yeah, it had some cool artwork as well. Again, a little bloody here, so just... But artwork wise, and even just the way the paper isn't glossy or anything, it reminded me of reading Scalped. So yeah, and Scalped is a great series if you've never read that. But I thought this had some stuff in common with that series, and I liked it a lot. So anyway, I know I've already told you that last week, and I just wanted to point out, so I've got a lot of good buddies, but none of them are really into this nerdy stuff like I am. Comic books, toys, which is partly why I do this, is, I started blogging about toys years ago, and now doing these videos. It gives me, a reason to share this stuff with people that also like it. And so one of the ways I do that is every time I go see a movie or read a comic book or buy a toy, I always go online and I want to read what other people's opinions are. So I read reviews of, and when certain things, like if I wanted to read a review of Shazam, say, there's plenty of opinions on there. You can go right to Rotten Tomatoes and that will link you to, 20 or 30 reviews of that movie. So you can get to see lots of different opinions. With comic books, Comic Book Roundup is a really good site that kind of links you to all the various reviews around the internet. And if I want to read reviews of a Spider-Man comic book, say, there's usually, 20 different opinions out there I can read. But when it comes to things like The Crow, there's very little out there. Either not a lot of people are reading it, which is probably true, and even fewer people are bothering to hop online and review it. So I did search around to see if anybody else had reviewed The Crow, Memento Mori. And oddly enough, of all the people in the world, I did find somebody that reviewed it. And it was on a website called Comic Crusaders. And it's written by a guy in New Brunswick, Canada, which is the province that I went to for my bachelor party, just a neighboring province. So I don't know this guy at all, but I just want to tell you that I was annoyed by his review of this thing, because I like The Crow as a series. It's had its ups and downs, but I really would like people to give it more of a chance, because I'd like them to do more of these series, and I'm sure if the sales picked up, that would inspire them to do more Crow stories. So when I read this review, and I was just very very frustrated. So he says here, so the last incarnation of the concept was 2014, I believe, with an offering called The Crow Pestilence. It was dismal, and the interior artist, I felt, had basically made a horrible parody and caricature of what I consider to be very serious and dark themes. It made me think that this guy was most likely trying to amuse himself by upsetting Crow fans. Perhaps I exaggerate a bit here, I agree, but it was bad, very, very bad, and I never got past issue 1 of Pestilence. So again, it's a 4-issue miniseries, and he didn't get past issue 1. Fair enough, if you don't have to buy the remaining 3 issues, but it seems kind of silly to go and kind of tear down the series when you haven't really read it. You've only, it's like you only saw the first scene of a movie or something. So anyway, so that's what he says about Pestilence. So then he moves on to Crow Memento Mori, and so I was sitting here looking at this new cover, and since I had missed issues 1 to 3 of this newest offering of The Crow, I was eager to open it up. And then, what the hell is this? This is the opening panel? Dead air? Seriously? Who would ever approve of a panel like this for an opener? I was flabbergasted when I found that this atrocity then repeats itself over the entire first page. To make matters worse, the artist made sure to put one more just like it at the top of page 2. Perhaps to maybe twist his rotten pen into my heart a little further. As I scanned quickly through the pages in disbelief, I noticed that the content of every single panel on nearly every single page is represented at pretty much 90 degrees vertical throughout the entire issue with few exceptions. This is not acceptable in my opinion. There is no heart or feeling in any of this artwork for me. There is nothing alive or moving at all. That's as far as I got. So he goes on, and I'll say he's pretty good with his words and stuff, all right, but he goes on, he writes his review and gives the series 1 star. But in this series, he only read the first issue of 4. In this series, he only read the last issue of 4. And he didn't even bother to get past the first couple of pages before he felt the need to post this review. And, this isn't going to help this book. So, yeah, if you were considering reading this book, I'd say please be mindful of the reviews that you check out. Because if you just glance that and see that it's only been given 1 star, you might assume that this is a terrible series, which I don't think it was at all. And even shots from the last issue, I don't know what he's talking about with it all being vertical or whatever. There was lots of variety in the panels, and yeah, I really like the artwork, and yeah, definitely get through more than the first 3 pages, please, and check it out, because I thought it was pretty good. So, anyway, that's it. I just wanted to call out this dude from New Brunswick. I don't think there was any avenue for me to comment on his website, but if by chance he checks out this video, yeah, feel free to comment below, and dude, go read the rest of this comic book. So, yeah, that's it for this episode of Mike's Collection, so I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.